Okay. All right. We're almost ready. I haven't done this in a while. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the attendance. If you're not here, that's fine. You'll be able to watch the video later and email me, and I'll mark you as receiving credit. But I just want to make sure everyone watches this at some point. So the eye clicker is on, please. You all just please sign in. Thank you very much. All right. I think we have 27 out of about 40, so which is not bad. But people are still coming in. That's fine. All right. So welcome. Let's see, where's my if you could all put your cameras on, I would appreciate it. This was my rule during the pandemic, and it makes my life easier, making sure they can actually see you. Oh, yes, there you are. There you are. So welcome to Houston. If you're not from here, when we get, 1 inch of snow, the city shuts down for 48 hours. I, I grew up in New York, and we never closed school. It happened, I think, once when I was in the 6th grade or so. We had one snow day. It never happens. But this is Texas, and people are driving or hurting themselves, so it's a bad thing to have. My last Zoom class, I think, was during the COVID pandemic, which is, oh my gosh, almost 3 years ago. Hard to believe it's over. But what I'm going to do with this one is try to teach as normally as I can. I have the roster open, and I'll just call on people because no one ever raises their hand anyway in this thing. So I'll just call on you, and you'll unmute your microphone and be there. Again, the attendance is running. I want to start by just walking through the syllabus, if I can, for a few moments. I did it briefly last class, but I didn't have nearly enough time to do it. So let me just walk you through it. I'll put the screen on to share for a moment. Okay, there we go. All right, so this class will be a little bit different than the other classes. Again, you've all taken property, you've taken torts, you've taken contracts, and so on. But this class is different in the sense that constitutional law is really a collection of decisions from the Supreme Court of the United States. And you will need to know a lot of cases, a lot of them. These cases were decided at different times by different courts, which means you also need to know the justices across time and how a given court was sort of reacting to the events of the day. So courts in the early 1800s, courts during the Civil War, courts during World War I, courts during the Great Depression, courts during World War II, courts in the Civil Rights era, courts in the modern era, courts today, right? There are a lot of things to think about. I'm also painfully aware that most students don't really know much about American history. If you do, congratulations, you are in good shape. If you don't, that's fine. I presume you know nothing, and I will teach you what you need to know about American history and politics. It's not an easy task. There's a lot to learn, but I think you'll all be better off as citizens of the United States to have this information than not have it. Okay. So the textbook is the big red one. I don't have one in front of me at the moment. I can't grab it. This is a book that I wrote with Randy Barnett. Randy's a professor at Georgetown. We're in the 4th edition. You are probably the last class that will be using this book. The next edition will be the 5th edition out next year. So you have a collector's item, I suppose. There's also the supplement. These are new cases that have been decided in the last couple of years. Usually you have to buy this. It's like a $60 book. I will give it to you for free. You're welcome. Perks of having a professor as your author. There's also the 100 Cases book. Does everyone have the 100 Cases book? These are summaries of the cases, which I provide to you. It's a very popular book. Lots of people use it at different schools. But also it's, I think, a very good way of sort of figuring out the facts. The facts of these cases are often kind of dense. So the 100 Cases book is good. There's also a video series. Everyone started watching the videos yet? I hope you have. We put a lot of work into these, and they're very good. I'm not just saying that these were watched by students across the country. Now they're actually on YouTube as well, which is also a new thing. In the past, you had to go through Casebook Connect and log in here, there, blah, blah, blah. They're on YouTube. So you can watch it when you're on the elliptical. You can watch it when you're running, whatever else you want to do. These are all available for you to watch. You can put them on double speed if you want. But I encourage you to watch. I ask you to watch them before class. I can't force you to, but I know pretty quickly people who are not watching because they don't know certain things. It comes out quickly. The exam in this class, it's 3-hour in class. The exam is open book, but it has to be on paper. Okay, do you understand what that means? You can bring whatever you want as long as it's printed. Any book, any printed outline, a horn book, my book, I don't care. Do you know why I don't care? Because it won't help you. This is the kind of exam where the notes will not help you. In fact, if you're flipping through your notes, you probably won't finish. The exam is meant to be finished in 3 hours. It can be finished. Most people do, but those who don't generally are not prepared enough. No open internet. Oh, Lord, no AI. You can actually see AI answering questions about ConLaw. It's almost kind of really curious how it does. It's very creative, but it screws things up very badly. So I would not encourage you to even think about using AI for this class, but I can't stop you. I'm not allowed to. Well, I can stop you for the exam, but I can't stop you outside the exam. Old exams. There are a lot of them. Look how many I have. I can't even count. There's a lot. These are exams going back about a decade when some of you, I guess, were in middle school, I suppose. I'm feeling old now. At some point this semester, you should start going through these old exams and take them, not just look at them, actually try to take them under time. You'll see that there's a memo and an A+ answer. The upshot is you have a lot of guidance of what's right. Now, we say, Professor Blackman, Josh, oh, by the way, call me Josh. I'll call you whatever your first name is. I like first names, make my life easier. We'll say, Josh, will you go over an exam you write? And my answer is, sure, I will, so long as you first review it yourself. It's a deal, right? So I give you these memos. I give you these A+ answers. If you self-assess yourself first, I am happy to talk to you. But I don't want you just coming and say, hey, I wrote this. Can you read this? Because that's not meaningful. It doesn't mean you've sort of worked through it. But there are a lot of old exams. If you notice, I've actually not taught ConLaw since fall of 2020. It's kind of weird. There's no obvious reason why, just with the pandemic and with the way other classes, we were short on property professors. So I've taught other things. I haven't taught in almost 5 years, which is crazy. But don't worry, I've not slowed down. I'm ready to roll. This is not going to be rusty. Attendance, please be here on time and use the iClicker to sign in. Someone just admitted late. As I said that, it's fitting. Oh my God. Oh, I didn't change. This is terrible. No, they're not on Zoom. Office hours in person. This happens when I copy the syllabus from 5 years ago. No, the office hours are in person, Monday and Wednesday before and after class. I don't like Zoom office hours. I don't particularly care for them. I'm sorry, that was an error. I forgot to change it from last time I taught it. Please come by and come meet with me. I like to get to know students. In fact, one of the saddest parts of the pandemic for me is I didn't get to know my students. Like, there were some people who I taught for 2 or 3 classes, and they saw them at graduation for the first time. It's like, oh, hi, I've seen you at a little square, right? But so I'm happy to meet with you all. There's the email address. YouTube. All my classes are being live streamed. In fact, this class is being live streamed at this moment. I realized last week the audio of my what do you call it? The audio of the class didn't work. I'm actually very upset about that. We had there was some glitch with my mic. I'm actually not even sure what it was. But the second half of the class didn't have audio. So if you want, you can go back to fall of 2020, bring up that playlist, and just see how I taught the class years ago. Everything's there. By the way, I used to look like this. If you want to see what I used to look like for COVID. Yeah, that was before COVID. COVID was not good to me. Okay. There's also this link. These are the class notes. If you click on this link, open this up, maybe bookmark this page. There's going to be a document for each class. There was nothing for class 1, but for class number 2, I have some questions. These are the poll questions. I will usually post these the night before class, so you can look at them the morning of. These are not graded in the sense that they count towards your grade. These are just self-assessment questions, but I will ask you these questions. And I also have some texts and different things to think about. So just make sure you check the class notes every day when class starts. Class 1 we did last week. That's in the can. Class 2 is today. I post very precise page numbers. I don't fall behind. It doesn't happen. I am very careful about the clock. I'm very attentive to how much time things will take. If I sense that the class is, let's say, dragging a bit, I will speed up. And if a class discussion is going very well, I might slow down a bit. So I adjust the pace accordingly. Okay, what else? That's a syllabus. Okay, and yes, on each class, there's a YouTube link. Just watch that. It'll take you 5 or 10 minutes, and it'll make you that much better prepared. Maybe you don't like listening to things. Maybe you like reading. Fine. Then read the supplement. But I would encourage you to always watch the videos. Let's see. What else I want to talk about? My goal is on the last day before spring break, that it's class number 14. I'm going to divide the class up. So the first half, I will administer a question. I'm calling it a practice midterm. Again, I'm not grading it, and I'll give you a reason why in a moment. But I'll give you a short 45-minute to 1 hour question to answer in class. I haven't decided what that will be yet. I'll figure that out later, but it'll be something that's based on the things that you've learned so far. And then I'll go over it right away. The reason why I'm doing it this way is that in the past, I've given the midterm before spring break, and they've gone over it after spring break, and the mind just vanishes on spring break. Whatever you were thinking about just disappears. No one remembers what the heck they wrote. I'm sure you can attest to this. You don't remember what your exam was after spring break. So my hope is if I drill it immediately after you write an answer, it will be effective. Maybe it won't. Maybe this doesn't work. I'm trying something different. I always try to improve on last year. Adi, who's in the Langdell, do you want to just turn your camera on for a minute and just say hello?
Hi.
Okay.
I sent y'all a message about the exams also. We're going to go over them.
Yes, thank you so much. So Adi will go over some of the old exams with you in the Langdell sessions, which I think are all on Zoom. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but that's the rule. I don't have much control over that. But I would go to her. She was one of my top students. She's clerking on a court of appeals in a couple of years. She knows stuff pretty well. So I think you'll have a very good Langdell. So we have spring break. The first half of the class before spring break is what's often called structural constitution. That is, what are the separation of powers? What are the powers of Congress or the courts or the president? Right? That's the first half of the class. The second half of the class, which maps after spring break, starts with rights, equality, liberty, and so on. So the course actually breaks in half pretty neatly around spring break. It's a very different class. You'll think one way of me, the first 14 class of like, whoa, who's this guy in this right stuff? I come out of nowhere. It's very different. You'll see, trust me. And then the last day of class, I'm sorry, not the last day. We will do a final exam review session. I'll figure out the date that works best with you. I don't know what your exam schedules are and when your class is finished and other topics, but we will figure out a day to do a final exam review session. I'm not sure exactly when that will be. We'll figure that out. The final exam will be on May 10th. Make sure that's on your calendar. If you can't do that, we have a problem. In terms of expectations, you're all on call every day. And actually, I mean that. There are only about 40 something of you here. I can probably call on every one of you at least once per class. And the way I usually do this in class is I just start, the first row, and I just go up and down the row and up and down the row, and everyone gets one question, or one or more questions, depending how it goes. If you don't get it right away, I might give you a follow-up. If you're unprepared, I'm not going to sit there and just wait for you to figure out the answer. I've done that before. It's not very productive. I'll try to ask you questions to get you to the answer. If I sense that it's not happening, I'll just move on, but I will probably come back to you and maybe ask you a question that didn't depend on having done the reading, but was based on the class discussion. So even if I move past you, that doesn't mean you're sort of done. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to berate you. I think you're all professionals. You have to, I think you have to be mature and responsible for your own assignments. But I'll ask lots of questions. If you find yourself struggling with the assignments, I think the supplement will be your friend. My dear Langdale, Miss Schlenker, Adi will be your friend, and I can be your friend also. I can talk to you. But what I don't want happens every year. Students struggle; they never come talk to me, and then like the last week before the exams, like, Professor Blackman, can you go over my notes? Can you go over my notes with me? And that's usually code for panic, right? Go over my notes means I'm panicking at the last week of the semester. I've seen it before, so hopefully we don't get to that. I think that's it. Any questions before we get started? Just feel free to raise your hand. No? Oh, also one other thing. I use Otter. Everyone know what Otter is? Otter is awesome. Otter is a live transcription system. Let me just share my screen one more time. I've been using this since COVID, and it really is a complete a life changer. Because what it does is it transcribes whatever you're saying in real time. Let me show you how this works. 1 second. It's not working. Why is this not working? Okay. Forget. Okay. Anyway, I'll paste the chat here. But if you actually can have difficulty sort of taking notes, there it is. Okay. So as I'm talking, the words appear. Wow, magic, right? So the upshot of this is you don't need to sit there writing everything down verbatim that I say. The reason why is you don't have to. It's transcribing it for you. Instead, sit, absorb, listen, learn. Let the computer do the hard work for you. Okay? All right, good. I'll stop the screen share. Okay. Anything else before I get started? All right, so let's start with a question. Just a pop quiz. See who's paying attention last week. Hopefully you have your pop. Again, these are not graded. I don't really. I mean, I look at them, but they're not part of your grade. So let's see. How do I do this? Poll. Okay. Short answer. So question number 1. Okay. So if you pull up your iClickers. Okay. Okay. All right. Everyone see it on your iClickers? Yes, please. So question number 1. Which amendment was ratified more than 200 years after it was introduced? I'm just looking for a short answer. I'll give you about 30 seconds for this one. You should all have your pocket constitutions handy, and you should figure out the answer pretty quickly. Let's see what the results are looking. Okay. All right. 5 more seconds. Okay. All right, stop it there. All right. The answer is the 27th Amendment. And if you look at your pocket constitutions, which you should all have, right? It's on page 58, the last page. And you'll see that the 17th Amendment was submitted in 1789, but it was not ratified in 1791. It was not ratified till 1992. So a fun fact, this was the last amendment added to the Constitution. Now, you may have seen in the last couple of days that President Biden announced that there's actually, in fact, a 28th Amendment. Is there an amendment? Let's talk about it later. I don't think there is, but there's an argument that there's been a new amendment, and I'm not quite sure that works. Okay. The next question is meant to be difficult. And this one will take you a few minutes to think about. So the question is this. Question number 2. Why do people follow a court's Judgment. Why do people follow a court's judgment? I'm looking for a sentence or two. Bad text message in length. Think about this one for a bit. I can see you're all thinking. Give me another minute. I got some creative answers here. I'm just sort of scanning through what you guys are writing. All right, give me another 30 seconds or so. Try to wrap up your answer, please. Yeah, someone actually quoted a case. That's good. All right, I'm going to stop in 5 seconds. I think I've just read everybody in. All right. All right, so let's start calling on people. And I apologize. I will be going alphabetically. There's no good way of doing it. So, Joseph Abbott, you here?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm sorry. You're with the A, so you go first. I'm sorry. And Angelica, you're next, just so you know. What's your answer, sir?
Honestly, I have no idea.
Well, what did you wrote something, I'm guessing. What's your right?
No, I did not.
Oh, you're making this hard for
me. I honestly couldn't tell you.
Well, maybe this is useful. Why were you struggling so much?
I mean, I'm sure it's something. I mean, it seems sort of obvious, but also I assume that it's not because I'm not sure.
All right, fine. Other A friend, Angelica Amaro. What did you put here?
I just put higher authority. Can you hear me?
Yeah, here.
Sorry, I have my headphones. I have kids, so.
Oh, that's good. I have kids. They're watching movies upstairs. If they run in, you'll know why.
Yeah, I just put because they have higher authority. I don't really. This was my guess.
Let me work on this. How old are your kids?
5, 3, and 1.
Okay, so I got a 6 and a 4. It's around the same. Do your kids see you as a higher authority?
Sometimes.
Do they follow your judgments?
Most of the time.
And why sometimes they may not follow your judgments? This is relevant.
Because they think they have the higher authority.
My daughter's 4 said the other day, "Daddy, I'm the boss. You're not the boss." This is relevant, I promise. Sabina, are you here? No, Sabina. Jacob Arias, you here? Okay. Nicholas Barnes. Laura Barry. What's going on?
I'm here.
Laura, what did you put here?
I think for, attempts of consistency and conflict resolution.
What do you mean conflict resolution? That's a phrase we often use, but maybe not in this context. What do you mean conflict resolution?
When you're in conflict with the law or an individual, you can take it to this authority. And even if you don't agree with them, you can at least hope for some consistency in how the law should be followed.
Well, then, Laura, let me ask you a follow-up question if I can. What might the alternative be to following the judgments of the courts?
The alternative to following like a Supreme Court ruling?
Any court, not just America. What's the alternative to following judgments of courts?
I mean, it depends, but up to imprisonment, I suppose.
No. You're answering a different question. I'm not saying if you ignore a court, what will happen to you. That's a good point. But if we're designing a system of government, what's the alternative to having judgments of courts being followed? What's another system you could design?
Well, the alternative would be to ignore the court ruling or
Forget that.
like
There are no
alternative
courts.
design.
There are no courts.
I guess.
You're structuring government
Okay.
with no courts.
Then the legislature kind of has the final say.
And what do you think of that?
I think that they need a check
Why?
because, even despite their best efforts, they may step outside of what we've established in the Constitution as our rights.
But Taylor? Oh, Taylor Blackman, spelled differently. I like your last name. Taylor, you here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but so we just heard from Laura a minute ago that the courts can resolve conflicts. I think we can agree upon that, but it would be bad to have the other branches decide things because they need a check. What do you think about that?
I think that they need a check because as people change, as new people take power, what the legislature agrees is the law would change as the different people go through.
But isn't that a good thing? Isn't that when new people voted into office, that's what the people want? Shouldn't the law reflect what the people actually want? You say it's like a bad thing. There are elections. Is that a good thing?
Well, I think it would be a good thing if there's not major changes each time.
Why shouldn't the people have the government they want?
I think the people should have the government that they want. But I think that maybe change should take a little bit more time and not be so abrupt.
So that's good. Taylor, Juliana, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So Juliana, then let me follow up from Taylor's question. She says that change should happen too abruptly. Who gets to decide if change is happening too abruptly? Why are judges? What empowers judges to sort of make these calls?
Because the Constitution has given them the power to make these decisions.
Oh, does it? Really? Where does it say that? We just read the entire thing last week. You mentioned the Constitution. I love the Constitution. It's a dear document. But where does it say that?
I don't quite remember, but I know that it does.
It's not in there.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No. So what's in the Constitution, right? Article 3 says that the judicial power shall be in the courts, right? The Constitution doesn't say what the judicial power is. The Supremacy Clause says that that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Supreme law of the land, right? There's not a word in the Constitution that the courts get to decide what the meaning of the Constitution is. I mean, that's a power they assert. No question they assert that, but it's not actually sort of in the Constitution. Now, let me sort of change gears. Shelton, you here?
Yes, I am.
So, Shelton, let me ask you a question, please. I want to go back to something that Laura said a couple minutes ago. She said conflict resolution. What would happen in a world where people did not follow court judgments? Let's just start there.
It would be anarchy because what the law means would not ever be defined. And then each individual, I guess, could make up what it means to them, and we have no way to say who's right or wrong.
Let's just say we had a different history, right? And let's say that in the 1800s, Marbury came out the other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Marbury, the Chief Justice ordered the delivery of the commission. I said, Jefferson, Madison, give over the commission to Mr. Marbury. And Jefferson said, not going to do it. Not going to do it. Nope. No, thank you. Thank you for your ruling. I'm going to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen then, Sheldon?
I mean, at that point, it's the power of the judiciary would be undermined because they have no way to enforce their rulings.
So who? Thank you, Sheldon. Carolina, you here?
Yes.
So Caroline, let me ask you a question, please. You're a private citizen, right? And let's say that there's a judgment against you to, say, surrender property or to pay a fine, and you won't do it. You refuse. You know what, Judge? I think you're legitimate. You're not a real judge. I'm not going to pay this judgment. I'm not going to pay this fine. What's going to happen to you?
Well, if the judge has ruled that that is a decision, I would have to like appeal that decision and show why.
Assume all the appeals are gone. You lost all of your appeals. Make it easier. You're right, but just assume the appeals fail.
Well, I would have to show how that goes against like my basic rights as a citizen, maybe.
I'm saying all the appeals are done and the judge says, Carolina, you must pay this judgment by Friday. If you don't, blank. What's blank?
Well, that would probably happen if I don't follow the court's orders,
saying,
whatever.
what's going to happen if you don't pay the judgment eventually?
I mean, they're going to take away my property, or I'm going to have to pay that fine if I don't.
You said they will take away. Who's they?
The government.
Be more specific. Which branch of the government?
The judicial.
Is the judge going to take off his robe, get off the bench, and put some handcuffs on you? Who's
executive?
The executive. Wait a minute. I thought this was a ruling from the courts. Why is the executive enforcing it?
That's their job to like enforce that people are following the rules.
Okay, now we're getting some. Okay, so Carolina's correct. It's not the judicial branch that enforces a ruling. They don't have what Hamilton called the power of the sword, right? They can't lock you up. But they can issue an order to the executive branch. So, Yan, are you here? YAN?
Yes, I'm right here.
Hello. So let me ask you this question. Why would the executive branch enforce judgments issued by the courts? Why should the sheriffs and the marshals waste their time enforcing these court rulings?
Because they have the power to.
Oh, sure, the power to, but what if they don't? In other words, what if poor Carolina over there has a judgment and the sheriff says, you know what, she's my friend. I don't want to seize her property. I'm not going to do it. What's the court going to do then? Will the judge take off his robe and get on a motorcycle and start arresting people?
I don't. No.
Think about it. Could the courts exist unless the other branches enforce their judgments?
No, it needs the other branches.
Yeah. This is why Hamilton called the courts in Federal 78 the least dangerous branch, right? The least dangerous branch. Ricardo, you here?
Yes, sir.
Ricardo, why would Hamilton call the courts the least dangerous branch?
Because they don't have the power to enforce their authority.
They don't have the power to enforce their authority. Are they dependent on the other branches?
Yes.
Right. Hamilton says that the courts don't have force. They don't have will. All they have are judgments. Okay. Thank you, Ricardo. All they have are judgments. But that creates a dilemma. If the courts can't enforce their own judgments, they're in a very risky position. So let's say, is this Michael Chambers here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Let me ask you a question, please. We have good courts in this country, and don't tell me otherwise. We do. We have some of the best, I think we have the best courts in the world. But let's say we didn't. Let's say we have some really bad judges who didn't behave. And let's say that we had judges who were issuing rulings that were clearly contrary to law, contrary to the Constitution. And let's say that the courts ordered the executive to seize some property, to arrest someone, or to take some action that's clearly illegal. What does the executive branch do there?
What's the executive branch do if the courts are just giving out bad, erroneous judgments?
Yeah.
Well, I think that interesting. I feel like the executive would still have to enforce those judgments, but they also, yeah, they would just still have to enforce them.
So, Michael,
I feel like the wrong answer.
You're not wrong. Let me just ask you. You're actually probably right in a lot of regards. Let me just ask you a follow-up question, if I can, please. Can the president decide for himself whether an order is constitutional or not, or is that only something for the courts to decide?
Whether the order is constitutional, I think that would definitely have to be for other courts, to like other judges. I don't think that's within
the U.S. Supreme Court says, President, do this. Can the president say, you know what, I think the order is unconstitutional, I'm not going to follow it?
No, I can maybe like think of a bad argument for him not to, but I don't think he can.
Christian, you here? Christian? No? Trent, are you here?
Yes, sir.
I'll give you the same question I gave to Michael a moment ago. The court issues an order that's obviously unconstitutional. You know, imagine they say, I want you to, arrest, arrest a person because he published an article critical of the court, right? Clearly unconstitutional, right? Violates the First Amendment. Can the president say, in my judgment, that's an unconstitutional order, and I'm not going to arrest him?
Well, I think that the executive, I mean, they can choose not to, but I mean, in following that, you've kind of destroyed the whole like system in terms of like, because if you're the enforcement mechanism and you choose not to enforce, at that point, it's kind of just like a deadlock standstill.
So what does that mean for the courts then, though, Trent? Do you think the courts realize that if they issue an order that will not be followed, it could destroy the courts? What does that mean for the courts then? How do you think that controls the courts?
I think it holds the court to a higher standard in terms of they have to like really evaluate like the constitutionality of like what they're deciding. Otherwise, like you risk like just lack of enforcement, and that kind of just destroys your credibility.
Yeah, that's good, Trent. Thank you. So let me try to kind of summarize this little excursion to theory for a few moments. The courts are the least dangerous branch. Hamilton is correct about that. They don't have the power of the sword. They don't have the power of the power of the sword. They don't have the power of the purse. Right? They can't spend money. They can't enforce judgments. All they can do is issue opinions. That's really all they can do. They can write. Judges are not that powerful in the abstract. But judges also know that if they issue rulings that will not be followed, it will sort of make people recognize the court is actually not that powerful. Right? I'll go back to my friend who was at Angelica a moment ago. All the time, I yell at my kids, say, do this and do that, and they ignore me. And they damn well know I'm not going to do anything about it, right? I'm actually going to start, kick them out of the house when they're 4 years old, expel them. And they know they can get away with it because I do not enforce my power with the sword. I don't send me to jail, I suppose. But I don't enforce the power of the sword against my toddlers. It's much the same with the courts, right? The courts depend on this very fragile balance, this sort of fragile compromise. If they write an opinion, it will be executed. But sort of in the back of their minds, sort of creeping in the back of their minds always is this idea that, wait a minute, maybe if I do this, maybe it won't be followed, right? Maybe this will be the day that the people say we're not going to follow the courts. And this doesn't happen in one day. It's not like you just sort of wake up and say, we're going to ignore the courts. There's sort of an erosion that can take place, that there's a long-term criticism of the court and a long-term saying the court's not legitimate, that the court's, this fraudulent body. But over time, people say, you know what? Who needs to follow them? And when I started teaching this class, more than a decade ago, this was sort of more of a remote fear. But in recent years, there's been this sort of nonstop drumbeat of the court being illegitimate and the court being fraudulent and this and that. And there's valid criticisms, but the upshot is people are now clearly saying that we can ignore the courts, that we don't have to follow their judgments. And it sort of was once fringe, but I think it's becoming more mainstream. So the questions I'm asking here are not hypothetical. In other countries, courts are ignored all the time. In South Korea, there was just an attempted coup, and now the courts get to decide whether to remove the president. There's international courts that have issued arrest warrants that have been frankly ignored. There's no actual requirement that people listen to courts. It's only where people respect the court's judgments that they follow them. So Michael said as a point that, he whipped around real quick. Yeah, Michael just said, I'm not calling you. You're good. Michael just said, even if the court's issuing a really bad ruling, they will follow it. I think he's right. There have been rulings by the Supreme Court over the years that presidents have disagreed with. President said that I think the court got it wrong, but I'll follow it anyway. After not exactly president, but Bush v. Gore, right? Al Gore said, I don't agree with it, but I'll follow it. I'm not going to fight it to the end. President Obama said that certain rulings on campaign finance were wrong, but he's going to follow them anyway. A president said that Roe v. Wade was wrong. We decided they sort of followed it anyway. There are lots of rulings that have been unpopular and people disagree with, but they followed it. Now, what do they follow? They follow the judgment. In other words, if the court orders the executive branch to do this, they've done this, but they may not like it. All right. Questions on that discussion? Having awful flashbacks to 2020. I'm sitting here with Zoom. I hate this stuff. I don't know professors like Zoom school. I don't like it, but everyone has their own thing. All right.
Can I ask a question, Professor Blackman?
Of course you can, Adi. You're always able to ask a question.
I thought you were a departmentalist, but that didn't sound very pro-departmentalism.
Oh, I sometimes play devil's advocate, so you don't know what I am. But what's departmentalism? I didn't mention that, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Basically, that the Supreme Court isn't the final arbiter of whether or not of the constitutionality of something, that the other branches and the executive branch would be able to also decide that question for themselves.
Well, yeah. So here's the issue, right? And I think I made this point a few minutes ago. Nothing in the Constitution says the courts are the final word. That's not in the Constitution. Trust me, you can read it in there. It's not in there. Rather, each branch, each department of government has an oath, right? If you're the president, we just saw the inauguration a couple of days ago, right? We saw the president, we saw the vice president take an oath to the Constitution to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. It doesn't say as interpreted by the Supreme Court. It's as interpreted by the office holder. And I think that every day when you're in government, you take action. If you're a police officer, you decide to pull anyone over, right? If you're a prosecutor, you decide to charge them with a crime. If you're an inspector, you decide to search one's home. You are always deciding in the first instance whether something is constitutional or not. The courts can come in after the fact and decide whether you're right or wrong. And the courts, for more or less, have the final say. I don't think that's correct. But nothing in the Constitution says the courts are the final words. What courts can do is decide particular cases or controversies. They can decide judgments, but not more than that. Thank you, Adi, for keeping me honest. Okay.
I have another question.
Is that Stephen? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, because earlier you said the power of the judicial branch doesn't come from the Constitution.
I didn't say that. I said they have the final word on this. They do have judicial power. Just to be clear.
Okay, then never mind. Then
That's your question.
So if it's because we read about it, the judicial power, what it actually is, I guess.
Yes. Let's
and
talk about that.
so if it's not from the Constitution, where does it come from? Because I don't really know, I guess.
Oh, what a good question. All right, let's move on. I'm going to answer your question, Stephen, I promise. It's a very good question you asked. All right, so let me now just sort of recap our class last week. If you weren't there, or you might have missed it. Our Constitution was not written on a blank slate of paper, right? This wasn't like a bunch of guys in Philadelphia just kind of got together in 1787 and said, let's make a government, right? There's a long history that came before the Constitution. And we can start, let's start law, right? Stephen, what's law? What the hell? Let's start at the beginning. What's law?
A set of rules that you follow.
And who gives the law?
Whoever people choose, I guess,
Wait. But who gets to choose them?
Well, for us,
I'm not saying us. I'm asking the abstract. What makes something law? Can I just write a piece of paper and say, "Oh, this is law. You got to follow it."
it's that people are expected to agree to follow it by living in the society, I guess.
Did you vote to ratify the Constitution? I didn't. I wasn't alive then.
No,
Did you vote to authorize the bills passed in Texas and other places?
nope.
Let's go back even further. Who's next? Blake Connor?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Blake, I see here. Blake,
All right.
what is law? Why do we forget courts? Why do we follow law?
Say again, you cut out there.
Forget about courts for a minute. Why do we follow?
Okay.
Why do we follow law? What is law? You're in law school, right? Why do we follow law?
Why do we follow law? Well, practically because usually something bad will happen if you don't. But philosophically, because it represents the will of the people.
Was there a time before law? I mean, eventually there was a first law somewhere. What was there a time before law?
Rob, I would say so.
Yeah, and then how did things go back then?
Well, I would assume it would be the law of nature. So things were probably pretty violent.
Okay, stop that though. You're giving me good stuff. All right, what's this law of nature business? What is this? You said
how do you mean?
You said law of nature. I didn't say that. You said that. Tell me, what does that mean?
Well, I suppose it would mean whatever you say goes until that runs up against someone else. And then, there's a contest and whoever comes out on top wins.
So you're describing some sort of contest or conflict. Someone said it was law of conflict resolution. So I kind of like that phrase. Conflict resolution. So, back in, ancient times, let's just say ancient times, whenever that was, doesn't have to give a year, there was a dispute, right? One person says, that's my land. The other person says, no, that's my property. Connor or Blake, how is that dispute resolved?
Probably violently, I'd imagine.
Oh, you're right. It is violent. And who would prevail?
Whoever was better at the violence, or whoever had,
a better fighter. Yeah.
Posse with them.
Who brings a posse? Oh, that's interesting. So if you have more people on your side, then that your opinion controls.
Yeah.
Are you describing how law is made then? If you got a posse backing you up that you made the law?
I suppose so. I suppose you could say that the law is whatever is popular.
Wait a minute. Was that Taylor's question, right? Isn't that how we choose laws? Popular will. Interesting. So, Anne, are you here? A&H? No? Tuffy? Lauren?
Me?
You, yes.
Okay, and I'm here, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
So let me ask you the same question. Where does law come from then?
I would also say maybe the will of the people.
Right, but if we look through his history, what gives the will of the people the power to make law? In other words, we assume that if there's a majority that says something, they can control, but why does it have to be?
Democracy?
Oh, that's a modern concept. Come on, go back. There's no democracy back then. You had kings, you had monarchs, you had pharaohs, you had emperors. You didn't have kings, you didn't have presidents.
Right. So just power, I guess, whoever was in power.
So at some point in world history, you had just people in power, a king, which is called a king, or an emperor, or a pharaoh, or something, right? But then we have these things called courts, and the courts provide a check. I think that was Angelica or someone else said before, checks, right? I'll learn your names soon enough, I promise. Why would any king who's powerful, Lauren, agree to have his power checked? Why would anyone allow a court to sort of second guess a king's power?
I guess to keep in good standing with the people.
In good standing, what happens if he perhaps doesn't allow that sort of input?
Maybe uprising.
So not one of the first, but an important uprising happened in the year 1215. Very important year. We had our 800th anniversary a couple of years ago. What happened in 1215? Does anyone know?
Magna Carta.
Magna Carta. Who said that? I hear just your voices.
Trent.
Trent. Oh, thank you. Perfect, Trent. Magna Carta. Okay. Magna Carta was a very important incident in the history of the world. In the year 1215, there was a king, King John in England, not very popular. And he was very abusive towards his people, as kings often are. But the barons, these were kind of these lower level royals, sort of rose up in revolution. They said to the king, we are not happy with what you're doing. Here are all of our grievances. But they did more than that. They made the king agree to, at least on paper, surrender some of his powers. It says, I won't do this, and I won't do this, and I don't do this, and I'll give protections. And one of the provisions, I'm just paraphrasing, it says that a person cannot be deprived of their property except by the judgment of their peers. This idea that there's some sort of law that's above the king, that the king cannot seize your property unless there's some sort of process. What at the time was called the law of the land, or the due process of law. So this concept of having either a court or a judge or some other body review the orders of a monarch stretch back 800 years. Right? And we have these rules precisely because we try to avoid conflict, to avoid anarchy. And as Lauren said, kings do allow these sorts of checks to keep themselves in good standing. So the reason why we have law is almost as old as society itself. It's the idea that there's something objective, that there's some standard against which our actions are going to be judged. And these standards are decided according to law, not the will of an individual. You might call it the will of the people, you might call it the Constitution, maybe call it the common law, but that there's no single arbiter of right and wrong. And this very much does relate to the concept that was mentioned a moment ago called natural law, the idea that there is some sort of higher principles, that they're laws that exist independent of any one society. These are strong religious principles, these are strong common law principles, call it whatever you want. But it's there. So Stephen, did I answer your question? No, I probably didn't.
I'm not good.
You're good. I'm not good. I'm not even close to good. I'm not done yet. Got ways to go. All right. Any other questions? But yes, a very good question.
I might not be on your roll sheet, Professor, but
sure,
I've got a D in my last name, so it might have been skipped or something.
You know what?
So
you're not on my roll sheet, but you're next. Congratulations. All right. So I'll call you in a minute. I appreciate your honesty because you could have skated by. So let's just start the next question number 3. Short answer. This one should be, oops, this one. Is it working? Do you see it? I got an error message. Do you see the question 3 on your thing? No? Oh yeah, got it. Okay. Some people are putting it. Okay, good. Yeah, just put this one short, a couple words. Okay. Let's do Marbury. I've taught this case so many times. I feel like it's like an annual ritual. Like teaching Marbury is like waking up in the morning. It's like a thing. You don't care. All right. Very good. All right, stop it there. All right. So the answer, what position did Marbury hold, was justice of the peace. And it's kind of like a judge for some lower level cases, but it's basically a judge. All right. So, Teddy, I'll get to you in a minute, I promise. You'll be on call soon, but not quite yet. So let me just give you some background of how we got to Marbury. During the Constitutional Convention, it was widely assumed that George Washington would be the first president. Indeed, he was. This was the general of the Continental Army, the general of the army that won the Revolution. And George Washington was viewed as having this like sterling, this amazing character. Why? He did something that was never really done before. He voluntarily stepped down from power. He was the general of the Army of the United States. He was all-powerful. He was respected. The military was behind him. But after the Revolutionary War was over, what did he do? Did he try and become the king or the dictator? He could have. He probably could have, would not have been objected to. No. George Washington stepped down. He resigned his commission at Annapolis. He said, I'm not going to continue serving. I'm going to go back to my farm and be a farmer. This doesn't happen. If you ever watch the Hamilton musical, there's one line where the king says, he stepped down? I didn't realize you could do that, right? In other words, this wasn't done. When you had the powerful general, he became the leader. So when the Constitution was being drafted, they all assumed that Washington would be the first president. And indeed, he was. But there was a consequence for that. They didn't quite understand the idea of a political party. Republicans and Democrats, they didn't get that would happen. They understood there would be factions, what Madison called faction Federalist No. 10, right? The idea that you'd have a group that favors this interest, and a group that favors that interest. Imagine farmers versus merchants, right? Pro-slavery, anti-slavery, right? They would have these different factions fighting each other, but they didn't see the idea of political parties. George Washington was elected in 1788 or 1789 by a landslide. And there was no political party. It didn't really matter. But by Washington's second term, you start having these political parties. And these parties disagreed on a lot of things. So one party was the Federalist Party. The Federalist Party. John Adams was the president in 1796. He was the leader of the Federalist Party. The other party is called the Democratic Republicans, which is confusing. It's like, which one is this? Democrats or Republicans? It was both. It was the Democratic Republicans, or just Republican Party for short. Thomas Jefferson, who was a vice president, was the leader of the Republican, I'll say Republican just to make it easier, the Republican Party. All right. At the time, elections were done differently, right? It wasn't that, vote Trump Vance and Harris, what was his name, Waltz, right? You didn't have a ticket. Instead, the person who got the most votes would become president, and the runner-up became vice president. So imagine, if you can imagine this, President Trump and Vice President Harris. Could you just imagine that for a moment? That the mind boggles, right? But that was basically the setup, where you had President John Adams and Vice President Thomas Jefferson. They did not like each other. I won't quite say hate, because that's maybe too strong, where they really disliked each other. Also, my daughter's a daddy. Don't say hate. That's a bad word. Okay, so I won't say hate. They really disliked each other. Okay? That was the election of 1796. In 1800, there were several people running for president. Adams was not near the top. Right? He wasn't very popular. His Federalist Party lost big time in the election of 1800. The top two candidates, though, were actually Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. You might know the name Aaron Burr. He was a person who killed Alexander Hamilton some years later in a duel, if you ever watched a Hamilton musical. By the way, it's coming to the Hobby Center, I think in March. I shouldn't tell you this, but I will. Many years ago, Hamilton came to Houston, and I gave a prize. The highest score in the midterm got tickets. I'm not doing that again. I don't have tickets this year. But I had extra tickets that time. But Aaron Burr and Jefferson tied. And when there's a tie in the presidency, the House resolves it. But the House was evenly divided between Federalists and Republicans. And in every single ballot, there was a deadlock. Tie, 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 tie. I think after 30-something votes, finally the House votes for Jefferson as president and for Burr as vice president. And there were some deals worked out where people got positions appointed in the Jefferson administration. There was deals to be made. So Jefferson finally came into office as president. But before Jefferson became president, the outgoing Federalist Congress did stuff. The outgoing Federalist Congress created a bunch of new judgeships. And they appointed people, or at least they tried to appoint people to these judgeships. At the time, John Marshall was both the Chief Justice and the Secretary of State. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And on the eve of the inauguration, so the day before the inauguration, President Adams was signing a bunch of documents. Okay. So how is a judge appointed under the Constitution? So there's a couple steps. First, the president nominates him. Then the Senate provides advice and consent. And at that point, the president must make the appointment. The president will sign a piece of paper called a commission. Okay, what is a commission? Commission is just a piece of paper saying that I, President John Adams, appoint, William Marbury as Justice of the Peace. And traditionally, after the commission was signed, the commission is delivered, right? You bring a piece of paper saying, here, look, you are the judge. This is your commission. Now you become a judge. If anyone doubts you, you have this piece of paper as proof that you're a judge. That's usual plan. But Teddy, what happened with the commission of poor William Marbury? Poor guy. He never got it. What happened there?
The incoming administration, I guess the next day forward, did not want to honor the commission that.
Well, before you get to the next one, what happened in the Adams administration? What happened the last day? Did Marbury ever get his commission?
No.
Why did he not get it?
The Secretary of State, James Madison.
Before we get to Madison, I'm still talking in the Adams administration. Why didn't he get it during the Adams administration?
I guess they ran out of time.
Who's they? You say they ran out of time. Who's they?
The outgoing administration.
Who was in charge of delivering commissions during the Adams administration?
The president, John Adams.
Nope. No, this is in the materials. Conrad, who's responsible for delivering commissions?
Wasn't it Marshall just himself?
It was Marshall. Marshall's the Secretary of State. So again, here's the chronology, right? Adams signs the commission the last day in office. And then it falls to Marshall to deliver the commissions. But that doesn't happen. They ran out of time. We actually don't know why Marshall didn't do it. We're not entirely sure. He might have just not had enough time. His brother was helping him. But there's a lot going on in the Capitol, right? A new president was coming in. John Adams actually did not attend the inauguration of Thomas Jefferson. There were such adversaries, right? John Adams actually just basically got the hell out of town, and we can see how that might work. He just got out of town. But in the shuffle, Marbury never got his commission. And then Damon, you here? Damon? No? Evelyn? Shreya?
Yes, I'm here.
So Shreya, after the Jefferson administration came to town, James Madison, right, the father of the Constitution, James Madison became Secretary of State. Did he deliver poor William Marbury's commission?
No.
Why not?
Well, I believe he wouldn't have wanted the previous president's choices to go into effect.
Yeah. Why do you think he wouldn't want the previous president's judge to go into office?
They were in different parties, and then also he would want like somebody else that supports his views to go into.
So if the position remains vacant, they put their own people in there. Are you saying?
Mhm.
Very good.
Yeah.
So I think this is a useful sort of moment to reflect. Judges have had ideologies and philosophies for a long time. It's not new. It's not like, oh, suddenly, oh, wow, 2020, all of a sudden judges have all these ideologies. No, this is not new, right? Since the beginning, there have been fights between the president and Congress over judges. This is since the beginning of the Republic, 1800. And the Secretary of State, James Madison, said, you know what? I'm not going to deliver this commission. And they actually did more than that. That's not even the most of it. The Republicans in Congress basically repealed the Judiciary Act of 1800. They repealed it. And there's actually a lot of litigation about whether they can eliminate judgeships. And it's a complicated case. Don't worry about it here, but it was a very messy issue. So it's not even clear if Marbury's judgeship even existed anymore. But he never got his piece of paper. Poor Mr. Marbury. You know, it's like, imagine you go to law school for 3 years and they just don't give you a diploma. It's like, sorry, we're not going to give it to you. You had it in your grasp, but you never got it. I think you guys will all be very mad. Actually, it's a good analogy. Yeah, a diploma is basically a commission. It's sort of an evidence that you actually have some authority or some position, that you are a JD. Or when you get your bar license, they'll send you. It's actually very nice. My office has a very big thing hanging on your wall that you get a bar license. It's very nice in Texas. Other states it's much smaller, but Texas is big. Everything's big here in Texas. All right, Anna, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Anna. So did Mr. Marbury sort of just take this line down and say, okay, well, I guess I'm not a judge?
No, he went to court over it.
He went to court. That's what all Americans do. They go to court, right? What did Mr. Marbury do?
Like, he filed a suit, and
Where did he file a suit? In which court did he file a suit?
was it the Supreme Court?
He did. Wait a minute, Anna. When you sue someone, what kind of court do you usually start off in?
Well, you start in a district court and then appeal it all the way up, typically.
You start in a trial court, right? Can you just walk into the U.S. Supreme Court and say, hi, I want to sue someone? Can you do that?
Well, apparently at this time, you probably could.
Apparently. So let's just take a look at the Constitution. Let me just put the screen on for a minute to share. Okay. So we have Article 3 of the Constitution. Everyone can see it okay? All right. Article 3 of the Constitution provides, I'll just read it to you. The judicial power shall extend to all cases of inequity arising under this Constitution. Okay. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. And what does original jurisdiction mean?
It means that they get to rule on it first. It's not like an opinion.
No, what do you mean opinion? You mean appeal?
Yeah, it's not like an appeal.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
I knew what you meant. Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, so the next sentence says, in all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as Congress shall make. All right, so thank you, Anna. Chelsea, you here? Chelsea? No. Brian?
I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't.
That's okay.
I'm mute.
Thank you, Chelsea. I know that the Zoom, maybe you guys were in college during COVID, but this was just an awful period just for teaching. I don't look upon it.
I agree.
I'm glad you agree. It was.
I was not in college in COVID, but I agree that.
Well, then you got a good college education, because I just feel bad for people who suffered. All right. So let me ask you this question, please, Chelsea. A couple things were listed, right? It says, in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. Does Mr. Marbury's case fit in any of these categories?
I don't think so, because he did have a sense of an official title that just was not executed in time.
But look, is he an ambassador?
No,
Is he like a foreign minister or some sort of consul for another country?
no.
Is a state a party?
Is a state a party?
Yeah, who's he suing?
Oh, well, no, he's not suing a state,
Yeah, it's Marbury versus Madison. Who's Madison?
a person.
Yeah, the person. Who was Madison? What was his title?
Oh, the justice of the peace.
Well, no, Marbury wanted to be justice of the peace. Who's James Madison?
Marbury was a justice of the peace. James Madison.
What role did he have?
I'm confused. I'm sorry. Marbury was justice of the peace, and Madison was the chief justice. No, that's Marshall.
All of them, as I know.
Secretary of State.
That's right, correct.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Madison was the Secretary of State. He had the commission. He had the document that Marbury wanted. But look, it's not clear then that this case even fits within the Supreme Court of the Constitution. So now, is that Brian? Brian here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So let's go to the Judiciary Act of 1789. It says the Supreme Court shall also have appellate jurisdiction from the circuit courts and courts of the United States, of several states, in the cases herein provided for, and shall have power to issue writs of prohibition to the district court for proceeding as courts of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, and writs of mandamus in cases warranted by the principles and usages of law to any courts appointed, blah, 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 holding office. What is a writ of mandamus, Brian?
It's in order to do something, right?
So what actually did Marbury seek? What was the remedy that he was seeking?
He was trying to get the court to force Madison to hand over the commission.
Correct. He was trying to get a writ of mandamus. Read this, right? Does it say whether the writ of mandamus is in the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction or the original jurisdiction?
Appellate.
Does it say that? There's this first clause with a semicolon. You shall also have appellate jurisdiction. And there's a semicolon there. And everything comes after that.
I guess it depends on how you interpret that.
How did Marbury read it?
He read it that they do have the authority to order the writ of mandamus.
Right. So again, Marbury was not an idiot. Maybe he was right or wrong, but he was an idiot. So he said, look, I got it. The Constitution says you only have original jurisdiction for these few things, ambassadors, ministers, and states, and so on. But we have the statute, right? The first Congress passed a statute. And the first Congress granted the Supreme Court mandamus. That was the basis for jurisdiction. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Brenda, you here? Brenda?
I think she's watching on YouTube.
She's watching YouTube. Okay, she can connect. Okay, hi, Brenda. Good to see you. Hit the button to subscribe. That's it. I'm kidding. Leave some comments. No, I actually close comments. Okay. Bobby here? Bobby?
Yes, sir.
So, Bobby, let me ask you a question. When you bring a lawsuit, right, and there's a question of whether you have jurisdiction, whether there's actually jurisdiction to your case, what's the first thing the court must do to resolve that case?
They typically look at the Judiciary Act of 1789 and the other one.
My question's a little different. Can the court consider other things before deciding whether there's jurisdiction?
No, because if they don't have jurisdiction, their judgment's worthless.
Correct. So what's the first thing that Chief Justice Marshall should have done in this case? Very first thing.
See if he could actually like execute the writ of mandamus that to deliver the commission to Marbury, even if he could.
And if the answer to that question is no, is there anything else to decide?
No, he could stop there. I mean, there's nothing they can really do.
Is that the order in which John Marshall wrote this opinion?
No, it's the he did that third, and he asked whether there was a remedy second, I believe, and then the first one was whether.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So okay, where we want to be. So this is a thank you for that, Bobby. This is a weird case. It's a weird case for a lot of reasons. Number one, again, the reason why Marbury didn't get his commission was because who screwed up? Marshall. Who's deciding this case? Marshall. Huh? Wouldn't this be a good case for the judge to step aside and recuse and not decide because he's responsible for the failure to deliver the commission? Isn't that sort of basic legal ethics? So this is sort of this long-running grievance among law professors who care about these things, is that Marshall probably should have recused and not decided this case. But put that aside for a minute. The second reason why this case is weird is it all turned on whether there was jurisdiction. That is, did the Supreme Court have jurisdiction to hear this case? If the answer is no, as Bobby said, then the case is dismissed. There's no case, right? There's no case at all. If there's no jurisdiction, do you decide if Marbury's a right to the commission? No, why would you? If there's no jurisdiction, do you decide if mandamus is an appropriate remedy? No. All you have to decide is, was this case properly filed in the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction? Full stop. That's it. Once you decide that issue, the case is over. But Marbury did it kind of backwards, as Bobby said a moment ago. He sort of decided the jurisdictional issue last. Now, why did he do this? Why would he do this? Let's walk through it. So let's do the first question. The first question, this is for Abdullah. Are you here? Abdullah? Okay. Alexandra?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Alexandra, let me ask you a question, please. The first issue is, does Marbury have the right to a commission? What does Marshall say in this first issue?
So Marshall says that when a commission's been signed by the president, the appointment's made. When the commission's complete and when the seal of the U.S. has been affixed to it by the Secretary of State. So to withhold his commission would be unlawful and would violate a vested legal right.
Okay, so what is it's a very, very, very good phrase. What does a vested legal right mean?
So I guess it would be a right that Marbury had on the basis of being appointed as a justice of the peace.
And when was that right sort of completed? What was the final act that was needed to make that right whole?
When the seal of the U.S. was affixed to it by the Secretary of State.
Correct. Was delivery required?
It doesn't seem from the language here that it was required.
So let me ask you a question. Let's say that, after John Marshall failed to deliver it, it's sitting on Thomas Jefferson's desk, right? And then Jefferson just lights it on fire and says, adios, bye-bye, farewell, I'm going to burn this commission. Does that mean that he's not a judge anymore?
No.
Tell me why.
Well,
let me ask you an easier question. Have you ever lost your driver's license?
Yes, many times.
I have too. I just got one replaced. Yeah, we went to go see Wicked and then my daughter was putting my wallet and my license in Florida. Anyway, I got replaced anyway. So when you lost your license, could you no longer drive? Did you lose your right to drive?
I mean, I can still drive, but it's not good to drive without it.
But my point is, did you lose your right to drive, your vested right to drive, because you lost the paperwork?
I guess in the legal sense, yes, you shouldn't drive without your license.
But if you were pulled over and you told the officer, I lost my license, and he looks up your name and finds that, yes, you passed your road test and you passed the written test and so on, are you going to be okay? Your license was not suspended, right? Just you lost the paperwork.
Yeah, I'm going to be okay, I think. Yeah, I'm going to be okay.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. That's not legal advice, but you'll be fine. The short answer is that when you have a vested legal right, the actual paperwork is not so important. It's important to be sure to signal easily to a police officer that you are allowed to drive. But the upshot of this holding is when the act is final, when the actual commission signed and sealed, you are the judge. It may be harder to prove that you're the judge. You are the judge. By the way, signed, sealed, delivered, the Stevie Wonder song, anyone ever know the song, right? It's based on Marbury, right? It was signed, it was sealed, delivered. You're welcome. I've ruined the song for you all. So the first question is that once you have the signed and seal done, you are a better example, right? Let's say you have a diploma from South Texas and your house burns down, God forbid, right? And your diploma is burned to the ground. You're still a JD. You just get a replacement, right? The paperwork is just proof of your appointment, but it doesn't actually prove that you have it. In other words, if your thing burns down, you remain a judge. So the first part of the opinion holds that, as Alexandra said a moment ago, it was a vested legal right, and he was a judge upon the moment of the signature. Even if he never got it, he remained a judge. Okay, Marilyn, are you here? Marilyn? No, Marilyn. Brett, you here, Brett?
Good afternoon, yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that. All right.
Alrighty.
So the second question is, okay, Marbury has a right to the commission, okay?
Sure.
But what do we do about it? In other words, if he has a right, does he have a remedy?
He did. Yes, sir. Yeah, they said he did.
Okay, so what is the remedy here?
Well, he had the duty to that was assigned by law that like injured him as an individual, and it did so because he didn't receive that position.
Mm-hmm.
So the remedy would be, I suppose, to give him that position of justice of the peace.
Okay, right. So here, Marbury, Chief Justice Marshall establishes, I think, an important principle. And he says this, it's not actually true, but he says this. He says, the very essence of civil liberty consists in the right of every individual to claim the protection of the laws whenever he receives an injury. To put it simply, where there's a right, there's a remedy. If a person has a right, they can go to court to seek a remedy. That's absolutely false, right? That's not true. You must have a right established by law. Right, the legislature must establish what's called a cause of action to let you sue, but in the broad picture is close enough, right? That when you are wronged, you can sometimes go to court and seek a remedy for it. Now, not all actions are subject to review, right? Imagine, I really want to be, appointed as ambassador to, I don't know, Australia. I'll make something up, right? And I go to the president and say, Mr. President, make me ambassador to Australia. I really like kangaroos. And the president says, go away, Josh. You're an idiot, right? Can I sue the president for not giving me the appointment to Australia? Of course not. Right? That's ridiculous, right? This is a discretionary act. The president has a choice of who to nominate for positions. I can't sue to make him appoint me as ambassador to Australia. I'm actually going there for spring break. I'm going to see Bluey World. I'm very excited. But there are other questions, right? This question of, who does he appoint is what's often called a political question. A political question is like a question that's reserved for the political processes. The court shouldn't get involved to resolve them. But there are other kind of tasks that are often called ministerial. Ministerial. That's almost like the duties of a clerk, right? If I, go to the post office, say I would like a passport, and I filled all the paperwork correctly, they have to give me a passport. They can say, you know what? You're a bit of a jerk, and we don't like you. We're not going to give you a passport. If it's just a matter of stamping papers and putting process through, the government has to do it. And if they fail to, you can sue. Now, where does Marbury's decision, where does Madison's decision to not give the commission fall? Is that a political question, or is that ministerial? Oscar, you here? Oscar? William O.
Oscar's on the YouTube.
Okay, then. William O, you here? No. Ryan P.
Yes, I'm here.
So Ryan, how do we characterize the decision of the Secretary of State, Madison, to not give the commission? Is that some sort of a political question, something that's very discretionary? Or is that just kind of a ministerial clerical task, the actual delivery of the commission? How do we characterize that?
I think it's ministerial.
Yeah, why is it ministerial?
Because he has a responsibility to do it.
Because of what? What gives him the responsibility? Just be very clear.
Well, his position and the law.
The law. That's the important one. Thank you, Ryan. The law says that when you have the commission and you have the seal of the United States placed upon it, it's final. Right? That's what the law says. And once you have a final commission, you have to deliver it. Imagine, again, to use a post office analogy, I apply for post office, and the mailman decides not to deliver it. Says, you know what? I'm not going to put this passport in his mailbox. I don't like him. He's a jerk. That's a ministerial task. So this is not a political question that can't be reviewed. The failure to deliver is ministerial in nature, and the courts can examine it. And the court holds that the refusal to deliver is a violation of Marbury's rights. Again, the court holds that the refusal to deliver is a violation of Marbury's rights. Everyone with me so far? Questions so far? I don't see any hands. All right. Karen, are you here? Karen Q. Nope. Brian R, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So then we get, almost done. We've got 8 people left. A lot of people are absent, though. All right. So let's move on. So then we get to the third issue, right? So number 1, the court held that Marbury had a right to the commission. And number 2, the court holds that it can actually issue a remedy for the violation of that right. Brian, what's the third issue?
Was that the issue with jurisdiction? Whether or not the court had the jurisdiction to hear the case?
Yeah, so what does Marshall say here? This is probably the most important part of the opinion that he sticks last.
I think it established that they didn't, because as the Supreme Court, they had established, like, they can only have like a appellate review, I think. Or
wait a minute. Hold on a second. Yeah, what you said was correct. I need to just unpack this for a bit. The Constitution says, let me put this stuff. The Constitution says that the Supreme Court will have original jurisdiction in certain cases, and then appellate jurisdiction in some other kind of cases. Okay. Brian, what is Marshall basically saying about the Judiciary Act? What's he saying?
That's unconstitutional, right?
You're right. Wait a minute. Did anyone challenge the Judiciary Act as being unconstitutional? Did that come up anywhere?
I don't think so.
Did anyone argue that the Judiciary Act was unconstitutional?
If they did, it might have been Hamilton, right? Or
it wasn't Hamilton.
I can't really remember off the top of my head.
I got to tell you, Brian, this case is called Marbury versus Madison. Did Madison even present an argument in the case?
I don't believe so.
No, he did not. Imagine James frickin' Madison, right? Father of the Constitution, didn't even put in a brief. This is a weird case. In fact, this is in the notes. The Congress basically abolished the Supreme Court's term, so they wouldn't decide this case. They just said, you're not meeting this year. So we have this issue, right? We have this statute that seems to give the Supreme Court the power to grant mandamus. Marshall holds that mandamus is the appropriate remedy. But then he holds what? That Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789 is, Brian?
Unconstitutional.
And why is it unconstitutional?
Because it goes against what the Constitution says as far as what the power of the judiciary has.
Yeah, so thank you, Brian. Very good. So again, the Constitution says, here are the cases where there's original jurisdiction, ambassadors, ministers, consuls, where the state's a party. That Congress tried to expand the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. Congress tried to add to the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. Stephen, can Congress add to the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction?
I think they actually could just through amending the Constitution, but no, by themselves.
Right. So of course, Congress can amend the Constitution to add to jurisdiction, but can Congress?
No, they cannot.
Can Congress, by a statute, amend the Constitution?
No, sir.
So, Stephen, let me ask you a follow-up, please. According to Chief Justice Marshall, what happens when there's a conflict between?
I think
Can you finish my question yet? Can I finish my question? You're eager. So, what happens when there's a conflict between the Constitution and the statute? What happens when there's such a conflict?
He says that the superior law has to prevail, and so you need to, because if that weren't the case, then there's no point of having written constitutions, and so the Constitution prevails basically.
Very good. So this is the idea of a superior law. To go back to my was Angelica with their kids, right? When I tell my kids to do something, they ignore me. It's clear that I am not the supreme law at this house. It's very clear to me. But Marshall's saying that our Constitution is the supreme law of the land, right? That our Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And when there's a conflict between the lower law, that is the statute, and the higher law, the Constitution prevails. So if you look at Article 6 of the Constitution, this is what's often called the Supremacy Clause. I think it's probably the most important provision of the Constitution, in my view at least. And it says the Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of the state notwithstanding. So which one's listed first? The Constitution, and second, laws of the United States. Which one is superior? The Constitution. The Constitution is over the statutes, the laws of Congress. And so what Marshall's doing is exercising what might be called judicial review. It's often said that John Marshall made it up. That's a complete lie. It's just not true. Hamilton describes in Federalist 78. What is judicial review? What a court decides when you have a superior law and an inferior law, you choose the superior law over it. That's the power of judicial review. Now, to be clear, the court doesn't strike down statutes. I don't want you to ever use that word. They don't strike down statutes. It doesn't happen. All they're saying is in a conflict, conflict resolution, someone said that earlier, in a conflict between a superior law and an inferior law, the superior law controls. All right, everyone get that? Paulina, can I ask you a question, please? Paulina? Chanel? You here, Chanel?
Yes, sorry, I'm here.
That's okay. Thank you, Paulina. So let me ask you, and Chanel, you're next. So let me ask you this question. Marshall keeps saying there's a conflict between the Supreme Court, between this Constitution and the statute. Where in the Constitution does it say that the courts get to make this determination? I'm reading it right here, Supremacy Clause, right? Where does it say that the courts get to decide when there's a conflict between a statute and a Constitution? Where's that in the Constitution?
It doesn't say specifically, but I think that that's essentially what they refer to as the power of the judicial review and the judicial duty.
Is that in the Constitution? Go back to Article 3. Does it say the power
No.
of judicial? Is the word judicial review in the Constitution?
No.
It says judicial power. What's this?
Judicial power.
Yeah, what's judicial power?
So at the time, I think that's what was known as the judicial duty, essentially, to follow the higher law of the Constitution.
Absolutely did your reading. I'm very proud of you. Yes, there's absolutely a duty. But why couldn't it be, Paulina, that Congress passed a statute and they decided, you know what, we don't think there's a conflict? Again, look at the text. Does the text say that these are the only categories of jurisdiction? Does it say that Congress can't add more? Just read the sentence. Does it say that Congress can't add additional grounds for original jurisdiction? Does it say that this is exclusive?
I mean, they could.
I'm saying, just read the text. Does it say in only these cases as original jurisdiction? Does the word only appear there? It's right there. It's one sentence.
No. I think I'm reading the wrong thing.
No, you're not reading the wrong thing. You're reading the right thing. You're correct. The answer is no. Chanel, are you here, Chanel?
Yes.
Chanel, let me ask you the same question, please. Maybe Congress said, you know, we've read the Constitution, and it says that, okay, there's original jurisdiction for ambassadors and ministers and so on. We want to add another one. We want to add mandamus, because if someone, if someone's being denied a right, the Supreme Court should intervene right away. Does the Constitution say you can't do that? Is that in the Constitution?
It doesn't say you can't do it, but I think if it's not in there, it was likely deliberately left out.
All right, well, look at the next sentence, Chanel. It says, in all the other cases aforementioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction with such exceptions as Congress shall make. Is it clear that Congress can modify the appellate jurisdiction?
Yes.
But does it say anything about modifying the original jurisdiction?
No, which to me sounds like if they wanted them to be able to modify it, they would have said it there.
And that's what Marshall says, right? The fact is that the Constitution gave Congress the power to modify the appellate jurisdiction, but did not give a similar power for the original jurisdiction, means that they can't modify the original jurisdiction. Okay, so that's the holding of Marbury, right? That the the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction is fixed in stone, and absent an amendment to the Constitution cannot be changed. Now, let me give one more. Elizabeth, are you here? Elizabeth, are you? No? Okay. Fidel, are you here? Fidel?
Yes, I'm here.
So, Fidel, let me ask you a question, please. Let's go back to the Judiciary Act of 1789. Is it clear that this is granting the writ of mandamus in original jurisdiction?
Yes.
I'll read it.
The acts to establish the judicial courts of the United States authorizes the Supreme Court to issue writs of mandamus in cases warranted by the principles and usages of law to any courts appointed or persons holding office under the authority of the United States. Am I reading the wrong thing?
So is it clear, is it obvious that this is giving original jurisdiction mandamus?
No.
What might it also be doing?
I'm not sure.
Well, if it's not original jurisdiction, what's the other kind of jurisdiction?
Appellate?
Yes, sir. So maybe Marbury was wrong. Maybe Marbury couldn't invoke this at all. Fidel, couldn't it just be that this allows the court to exercise mandamus into appellate jurisdiction?
Yes.
So then, did Marbury file in the wrong court?
The Supreme Court is an appellate court. So, I mean, I would say
But did he start off in a trial court?
no, he did not. He started off in the Supreme Court.
So maybe the answer is that Marbury was just wrong, that this writ doesn't apply in the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you, Fidel. So this is again a sort of a confusing case for a lot of reasons, right? Just to list them. One, why was Marshall even on the case? He should have recused, right? Number two, why do you talk about jurisdiction last? If there's no jurisdiction, dismiss the case. Number three, the court declared the statute unconstitutional, but maybe the better reading is that this is the wrong court. That he should have sought mandamus after going to the trial court first. Why did Marshall do all these things out of order and saying all these questions didn't have to be decided? Dalen, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Dalen, why did Marshall do all this stuff? Why couldn't he just write a one-page opinion saying, easier to read for you for sure, one-page opinion saying, this writ of mandamus can only be used in appellate jurisdiction. Marbury didn't sue in a trial court first. We have no power to rule anything. The statute's fine. Dalen, why did Marshall do all this other stuff? He make you read this long decision that went on forever.
Maybe it was just kind of unsure if the Judiciary Act of 1789 applied for original jurisdiction. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you.
But why? In other words, if a court is unsure about whether a statute is constitutional, what should the court do if they're not sure? Should they uphold it or not?
I guess just review it further, and I don't know.
In other words, this was a statute passed by the first Congress, right? The very first Congress.
Right.
Many of these people wrote the damn Constitution. They were at the convention. They were at the ratifying conventions, right? They approved the Constitution. Do you think the first Congress had a good sense of what the Constitution meant, Dalen?
I would hope so.
I would hope so. Shouldn't they be entitled to some, deference about, okay, maybe they didn't pass a bad statute? Do you think?
I think so.
So Zoe, let me ask you the question again. Zoe, you here? No, Zoe. All right, Joseph, you're back up top. Here again, A. Went down from A to Z.
Knew it.
Yeah, sorry, my friend. You have the early alphabet. So let me ask you the same question again. Should we presume that the first Congress acted lawfully?
Yes.
So then why did the court in Marbury decide it was unconstitutional? Why did Marshall do all this stuff? Why did he go out of his way to decide a case where there's probably no jurisdiction, a case where he probably should have recused, and ruled that a statute of the first Congress was unconstitutional? Why did he do all this stuff?
He's sort of like hammering down his interpretation of the superiority of the Constitution to pretty much everything else.
Was it the superiority of the Constitution or the superiority of something else?
I guess something else.
What is something else?
It's a good question.
Angelica, what's the something else? It's not the superiority of the Constitution. Superiority of the
law of the land. I don't know.
As interpreted by
the.
Come on, you're almost there.
I don't know. My kids are coming up. They're about to get crazy. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm sorry. They're making noise. Sabina, are you here? Jacob, superiority of the law of the land as interpreted by. Oh, hi, sweetheart. I see you. Jacob, you here? Nicholas. Laura. Laura.
Yeah, sorry, can you ask that again? The superiority of
whose superiority was Marshall trying to establish? What was Marshall
I would
trying-
say
What was Marshall trying to do here? Why did he do this?
to establish the court's
Yes.
ability to review the laws from Congress.
Yes. Exactly right. Okay, so just take a step back. Again, what was going on? Jefferson came into office. He abolished all these courts. He abolished all these judgeships. They suspended the term of the Supreme Court. There was a conflict. Marshall was a brilliant judge, but also he was a politician. He was a member of the legislature. He served in government. He knew politics. And Marshall recognized very well that had he ordered Madison to deliver the commission, he would have been ignored. This goes back to the very first question of class today. Why do people follow courts? Marshall understood that this rule would never be followed if you're ruled to deliver the commission. So he decided to do something. He would rule in favor of the Jeffersonians, but in the process establish this power of judicial review that could be used in some future case. Again, the bottom line is that Marbury lost, right? Poor William Marbury never became a justice of the peace. Poor guy, right? Boo-hoo to him. But in the process, Marshall established that he has this judicial duty to decide conflicts between the Constitution and the statute. And critically, it is he, the court, that would decide this conflict and not Congress. Again, Congress passed a statute. Maybe they decided that, on our reading of the Constitution, this is fine. You can imagine a world that says that's enough. If the Congress says this is constitutional, that's sufficient. But this creates a sort of independent check on the judiciary to decide the meaning of the law, to say what the law is. That's not in the Constitution. It's based on this sort of idea of judicial duty. Read Hamilton in Federalist 78. But, here comes the key but, this is now the power of the court. So in the end, there was nothing for Jefferson to ignore. Right? Again, he won. Right? Marbury didn't have to do anything. Madison did not have to do a damn thing. So there's nothing to ignore. But this precedent was set. And once a precedent is set, it's followed. And in the years and decades and the centuries after Marbury, the Supreme Court has consistently interpreted the Constitution. And presidents have pretty consistently followed the rulings of the judiciary. We'll talk about a few instances where maybe people didn't quite see it that way. And there are a lot of instances throughout American history. But Marbury basically established this principle of judicial review. And it was the basis for almost all of American constitutional law. Okay. Questions? Questions? Angelica, do your kids have any questions? Hello, I see you.
You have a question? No, they're okay.
Our school's open tomorrow. They announced it yet, please, Lord.
I hope so.
The 5-day weekend is murder. This was just not fair.
Yes.
It's not fair. I'm looking outside. It's sunny outside now. It's ridiculous. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Teddy.
Why would he not want to take up the issue of the sign, seal, and deliver order of events and maybe issue an opinion that eliminates the delivery part, since that's kind of what caused this entire dispute? At least that's what I thought.
Well,
anyway.
Marshall says delivery is not required. I think that's probably correct as a matter of law. The reason why is under the statute, right, under the law that existed, the final act was set by statute, right? The final act was putting the seal. So you can imagine a different fact pattern where the president signs a commission, it's sealed, and then the delivery man, the courier, is trying to bring it, and he's mugged, he's robbed, and then some thief steals the commission. Says, "Aha! I am the judge," right? And just imagine that's a fact pattern. That wouldn't work. because as a matter of law, the commission is just evidence of the legal appointment. So I don't think delivery would ever be required. If that was the case and the mailman ever lost, the mailman lost my driver's license, that means I can't drive? No, that's not how it happens. So I think that's there. Marshall, I think, was correct on the merits. I think just the jurisdiction ruling, and I've been persuaded of this that maybe he had the better argument, but I still have my doubts of the jurisdictional argument. Good question, Teddy. Thank you. What other questions we have?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know the main point was judicial review, but could it also have been that he was trying to play both sides, I guess, politically? I don't know what the benefit would have been, but it seemed to me like he was trying to make both sides happy.
Right. No, I think you're describing it well. He's trying to play both sides. This was a compromise. This was a compromise decision where he ruled in favor of the Jeffersonians that they don't have to give the commission over. But he also ruled in favor of the judiciary that they had this power of review. The only person who lost was poor William Marbury, because he did not get his job. He did. Imagine he got appointed by the president to be a justice of the peace. That's a good gig back now. That was actually very lucrative. You got a lot of fees. You got paid some money for that one, right? Never got his job. In fact, if you ever go to Washington, D.C., you should never go. But if you do go, the Ukrainian embassy is a former home of William Marbury. It's just, if you ever go to the Ukrainian embassy, there's a plaque on the wall that says the home of Marbury. And after the Russia war started a couple of years ago, those people were laying flowers outside the. I'm saying, they must be laying flowers in honor of William Marbury, but that wasn't the reason why. Okay, good question. What else?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Brian.
Was this like a case that was like the court at this point knew that they had to kind of establish themselves as a player, like in government?
Yeah.
If this case wouldn't have happened, do you think they would have eventually found like some other constitutional issue would have come up where they would have to establish their power, or was this case just like the case that it had to be in?
Really thoughtful question, Brian. The Supreme Court at this time wasn't that important, right? Believe it or not, it wasn't that important. Most of the justices did not think of themselves like these national figures. The court hadn't decided many cases of any significance either. So this case sort of came out of nowhere, and it wasn't a high-profile case. There was another case decided around the same time. It was called Stewart versus Laird. Stewart versus Laird, Laird, decided around the same time. And that case actually concerned the power to abolish judgeships, right? Can they actually just abolish all these judgeships? It was a really complicated case. I don't have time to explain it, but the bottom line is they didn't stop the Congress from doing it. Everyone thought that Stewart versus Laird was a more important case. No one cared about poor William Marbury, but it turned out that Marbury was a more important case, right? Marshall, again, I think he's overrated. I will say that he's very overrated, but he's a very smart politician. He sort of navigated through these very complicated times in a way that the court didn't come out being injured. But after this case, the court became a lot more important. They would not strike another federal statute, I think, for more than 100-something years. It didn't happen. Congress, the court upheld almost every single federal statute for a very long time. I think it was maybe the 1940s or 50s. Lamont, maybe, I can't remember, but it was a long time. So again, Marbury had no immediate impact on federal law, but established his principle that became a lot more important 2 centuries later. But good question. What are the questions we have?
I have a question about why jurisdiction wasn't appropriate under the affecting a minister, considering that it was requiring the Secretary of State to take an action.
I always get this question. You guys are smart, right? So the text concerns ambassadors, public ministers, and consuls. And then the question is, it's a ministerial duty from the secretary. Is that your question?
Correct.
Right. So I always get this question. It's a very smart question. Public ministers refer to diplomats, right? So you have ambassadors, public ministers, and consuls. You refer to diplomats from abroad. It's a foreign policy concern. So I don't think the Secretary of State and his ministerial duty would fall under this. But I often get this question. So it's creative. I like it. It's creative reading of the text.
Okay.
But it's good. You're thinking about it. Mm-hmm. What are the questions we have today?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Why did no one else, like any of the other midnight judges, bring a claim? Why was it just Marbury?
So I don't know how many never got their commission. I think it's a fairly small number. I don't actually know the answer to that. I only know a couple of them didn't get their commissions. I think a lot of them, though, who actually got their commissions were actually abolished, and they were focusing on the other litigation. What I do know is that after this case, Mr. Marbury never tried again to go to the trial court. He never sought it again. So I think this might have just been an outlier. I actually don't know the answer to the question. It's a good question.
Because it makes me wonder if SCOTUS's power is just limited to cases and controversies, then technically this would just be one case or controversy, and other people, like, it doesn't necessarily impact the other people's.
Well, to the extent it's jurisdictional, I think no one else can bring the suit in the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. But what I would have done is just go to the trial court and say, look, I have the right to a remedy, and you can do this in the trial court's jurisdiction. But I'm pretty sure that these positions were all abolished by the Act of 1801. So I don't think much was done. It was a very weird time where the Congress basically just rewriting the judiciary. So it was just, I think people just sort of gave up on it after a while. Again, this was 1803. This is only a couple of years after the inauguration. A lot of time had elapsed. People maybe just moved on. Good question. It's another funny issue about pardons, right? Does a pardon have to be accepted? It's an issue that's sort of in the news now. In other words, you must deliver the pardon. There were pardons that were signed at fairly last minute, and it wasn't clear whether any people actually got these pardons before the inauguration was over. Could you imagine that President Biden signed a pardon on the night before the inauguration, and then they've got to deliver it, and then President Trump ripped it up the next day? Would it be valid? I think a pardon's a little bit different in that I think it's effective upon signing. I don't think you need to have the delivery as well. So, but it's a fun thing to think about. What else? All right, let me wrap up a bit, and you guys can get out of here. And I don't know if you have another class coming up or whatever you want to do, or putting more Bluey on for your kids. So the thrust of this first class, right? The thrust of this first lecture is about the judicial power, right? And we often discuss why is it that people respect the courts, and I think Marbury illustrates this principle. It's the idea that when courts adjudicate what is a higher law, they're not just imposing their own will, they're imposing some sort of objective standard. And that people tend to follow courts. Perhaps they fear anarchy, they don't want to revert to a state of nature, and that people think that courts are doing a good job. But there's nothing set in stone. If the courts transcend that role, they go perhaps too far, it's likely that the judiciary will not be respected in that regard. Next class, moving on to some decisions from the Marshall Court, and these are some very important decisions. We'll be talking about McCulloch v. Maryland, which was the power of the Bank of the United States. That is, could the United States create a national bank? And could the state of Maryland tax the national bank? Probably the most important case ever, more important than Marbury. We also start talking about the Commerce Clause as a power of Congress to regulate commerce between the several states. And a case called Gibbons against Ogden and all the boat going from New York to New Jersey. And then we'll talk about the Bill of Rights and Barron v. Baltimore. In other words, are the states required to follow the First, Second, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments? All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you so much. And if you didn't sign to the iClicker, please email me when you watch this video, and I'll be happy to mark you present. All right. We're dismissed. Thank you so much. And if you want an office hour today, email me. I'll find a time to chat with you. I'm not quite sure this will work. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. See you on Monday.
Professor, my iClicker worked for attendance, but it didn't let me send one of the answers through. Do I need to send you the answer,
fine.
or?
That's fine. As long as the attendance is there, it's good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.